So, you took the red pill, or at least you want to see what I have to say about the red pill. Maybe you didn't take it, but you want to listen to me sell it. I don't know. Whatever it is, you're here now, and we're going to talk about it. So, the red pill. Knock it all down, blow it all up, salvage a couple of things here and there, start over anew. It's scary. I understand. It's intimidating. It can go wrong. It can definitely result in some bad seasons. It's almost certainly going to result in at least one bad season by definition. But for those of you who were wondering, this is kind of where I am right now. I think this is just a more realistic option. I think this is how a football team should be run in these situations. I don't think a half measure is going to get you out of this very difficult situation the Seahawks find themselves in right now. So, to me, the red pill is the pill to take. And I'm not the only one who thinks that. I am certainly in a bit of a minority among people who participate on my channel, but there's a significant portion of you guys who see it this way. The poll I ran last week, again, the white pill won with 70% of the vote. That was a runaway winner. But the red pill came in a distant second, 11%. So with 1.6 thousand votes, 1,600 votes, you're still talking a little shy of 200 people voted for the red pill. So a little less than 200 people are down with this. And I think that indicates that there is definitely some interest in this fan base on hitting the reset button. And I'm going to go over the red pill scenario in this video. But to go over one scenario in the red pill is kind of hard to do because the benefit of the red pill can be summed up in one word: flexibility. If you force yourself to stick with Russell Wilson, yes, you lock in that franchise quarterback, but you lose a ton of flexibility in the process because you have a limited time window and you're forcing yourself to work within this tightly defined box. So, the red pill, while I will present a scenario that I like, just know that there are probably a few dozen reasonable scenarios you can construct if this plan is followed. So, the red pill. Let's take a look at the general gist of it. So, you clean out the coaching staff and front office. They pretty much can all go. Maybe you keep Shane Waldron, maybe John Schneider, but honestly, probably not. I don't think either guy is good enough, has proven anything yet. And even if they are good, like Shane Waldron, I think Shane Waldron is probably going to be good one day, but if you're going to blow everything else up, you may as well get him out of here as well. After that, you purge the roster of older, unproductive players. There are a lot of guys on this team who are making a little too much money, who aren't doing a whole heck of a lot for us on the field, and who just need to go so we have a little more money and we have the roster spot. You hold on to the young, cheap players with upside. We have a few of them. We don't have as many as other teams, but you basically you set the building on fire. And after the fire cools down, you go through the ashes and you find the things that survive and you take those home. So you're going to pick through a burnt down house and you're going to find the things that managed to survive the flames. And that's what you take with you into the next era. You build around your foundational blue chippers, and we have a few for one reason or another. Jamal Adams is one because his contract makes it impossible for him to be moved. DK Metcalf is one because he's really, really good. And Darrell Taylor is starting to turn into one. Maybe Damian Lewis is on the fence there. I don't know. He's not having his best season, but he's still good. So you have a few pieces you can build around, and it's not out of the question that you might trade one or two of those guys, but in all likelihood, you're going to be building around those guys. And at that point, you give the new regime, whoever it is, whoever you put in charge, full roster control and basically tell them you can do whatever you want. The white pill is us playing the part of the Disney Corporation, but the red pill is us playing the part of A24. We're going to let these guys do whatever they want to do with this team to try to build it their way. And then you use the 2022 season to transition to a new era. You're gonna it's gonna take a little bit of time to get some of the old Carroll stuff out. I sometimes see people say that, well, if Carroll's the problem, why don't you just get rid of Carroll and keep everything else? But the thing is, everything on this team is Pete Carroll. Every single player and coach on this team is here because he wanted it or he permitted it. And there's a lot of stuff that is going to have to get purged out before Carroll is truly gone. You can fire Carroll tomorrow. Pete Carroll will still be here in every single player and coach. That's not to say they're all bad, but they're all here because Carroll willed it that way. So it's going to take some time. 2022 is going to be used as the transition year, and then you target 2023 for the next great Seahawks team. Very reasonable to do a full rebuild that quickly and have great results by 2023. There are some difficulties packed in here, of course, but they're a little easier to navigate around because of the flexibility. So some difficulties include finding the general manager and coach combination who are able to build and develop a good, smart roster. So you need to find people who are willing to work for you. Now, money will not be a problem, and neither will the power you're giving them. You can hire a guy and say you're going to be the head coach and you're going to have partial GM powers. Or you can say full GM powers, I guess, if you think the guy is capable of doing that. A lot of people aren't, but some people are. So you need to find the guys who are not only willing to do it, but are also good. That's never easy, no matter what. You then need to find a trade partner that Russell Wilson would approve of that has enough assets. Wilson is not going to be okay with going to a team that is a dead end with no hope of competing for a couple years. And we're not going to send him to a team that can't send anything good back. Next difficulty would be getting a top-end quarterback, either via the draft or a reclamation project from another team. You then have to find a defensive coordinator who feels confident that they can utilize Jamal Adams, because Jamal Adams is one of the players who is just stuck here for the time being. Cannot move off him, cannot trade him, cannot cut him. He's just here for now. So whoever you bring in has got to be comfortable with that. And finally, and this might be the hardest part, because I'm in a few Seattle Mariners Facebook groups, and I know how Seattle sports fans sometimes don't understand what's going on. Selling the fan base on being patient and accepting at least one bad year, if not 2 bad years. That's the nature of a rebuild. It doesn't happen immediately. It can happen pretty quickly if they get it right. But if you go into 2022 as a fan expecting the team to win the division and go to the Super Bowl, and you start throwing a fit because they're losing games and they're not looking so good and they're getting their feet underneath them, then that's not useful. So there are definitely going to be some difficulties here, but there are less difficulties than with the white pill. Not to say that these difficulties are going to be easy to overcome. I'm going to lay down a particular blueprint that caught my fancy as I was thinking about this scenario. But this path gives you an extra window of time plus a bunch of draft picks that you otherwise will not have. That was one of the real difficulties of me trying to construct the white pill. I had to hit free agency hard. I had to wang it hard because we didn't have enough draft picks to build through the draft, and we also didn't really have the time for it. Here, you can build however you want to build. It's fine. As long as you build it correctly, you have that freedom. And you don't have to build it good immediately. You don't have to try to build Rome in a day. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and go forward and try to figure out a good path. All right, so part 1 is finding a head coach. And we're going to spend a lot of time here because with the red pill, once you get your head coach, you kind of just let him go hog wild once you bring him in. You get somebody that you trust to do the right things when building the team, and then you just say, okay, you're in charge now. What I don't want is us to hire a head coach and then make him uncomfortable because we're putting all these assumptions on him. We're putting all these additional orders on him. So when you hire this head coach, he's going to do things his way. So getting that head coach as an organization is a huge portion of the fight. Once you find that right head coach who can also help build the team, head coach / GM or head coach GM tandem or however you end up doing it, once you get that guy, he takes care of the rest in whatever way he sees fit. Now, I have some ideas on how they can do that, but understand that whoever you hires, the different people that you can hire as head coach are going to have different ideas on how to build the team. So first, let's assume that a good and sensible general manager has been found. I don't know who the hot general manager prospects are. That's not something that people tend to talk about very much. A lot of the time, teams will just hire somebody from New England or Green Bay or Kansas City or something like that because those teams win a lot. And I don't have any strong preferences there. Just give me somebody good, basically. Give me somebody with football knowledge. Since the team is offering a more or less clean slate to build a team and can handle a bidding war, any top coaching prospect is on the table. I don't think you're going to have to worry about anybody saying, no, I don't want to go to Seattle, because you're giving them ultimate freedom. So the new coach, whoever he is, will only be married to a couple of players. Jamal Adams, you cannot move him. Tyler Lockett, you really can't move him. And Jordan Brooks, who is in the second year, will be on a third year of a rookie deal, cannot be moved, worth way more dead than alive, as they might say. So that's not a whole lot to be married to in 2022. And Lockett is still really good. Brooks is young and has potential. Adams has been very good in the past, so that's not that bad. There is some dead money on the cap because of the contracts you did this year. Dwayne Brown, $3.5 million, Diggs, $2.5, Everett, $2 million, and Posick, $1 million. So that's $9 million in dead cap next year for players who may not be here. And even if they are here, they will be costing money on top of this money. But it's not that bad. The cap is going to be approaching $200 million rapidly. So we are talking about not even 5% of the cap. It's fine. Okay, so with that in mind, we kind of have the choice of any top coaching candidate that we like. I've listed a lot of names here. There are going to be a couple others that people are going to like, but no particular order. Let's just dive in and take a look at some of my guys, some of the guys that I really like. This is probably my favorite right here after really thinking about it. Kellen Moore. He's barely older than me. He's 34 years old. If he's good, he could be your head coach for 40 years. Like, that's possible. That's the beauty of a thing like a Sean McVay hire. They could be there forever. And imagine how nice it would be to not have to worry about the head coaching spot for 40 years. His only offensive coordinator experience, I listed his relevant high-level experience here just so we can all get an idea of what we're working with here. He's been the offensive coordinator since 2019. Now, he has been working under Jason Garrett and now Mike McCarthy, so I don't know how big his responsibilities are, but in 2019, the team was 6th in scoring and 1st in yards per game, so they were very good. 2020, they only had Dak for like 5 games, something like that, 4.5, 5 games. They were still middle of the pack in points, not bad, 24.7 points a game, 371 yards, still middle of the pack, so given the fact that he had to work with, at one point, a 4th-string quarterback, pretty good. And so far this year, they've been excellent. 32 points a game, 3rd in the league, and over 450 yards a game, 1st. So Kellen Moore has been around greatness ever since he took over that offensive coordinator spot. And I think that Cowboys fans can attest to the fact that the offense did change significantly when he took the job from, who was that, Scott Linehan? Yeah, so really good stuff here. Kellen Moore's my guy. He's local. I think he looks at the game the right way. I like the way that he approaches things. And I think if you got him, you could have the guy for a long time if you're willing to be a little patient with him. Eric Bieniemy is the other super hot prospect. I'm on the fence on him. He's definitely older. He's 53. But that doesn't have to be a deal breaker. Now, I don't know if his past legal problems would be a deal breaker. I don't know very much about them. So for me, they're not. But for the team, they could be. And that's part of the reason why he hasn't gotten the head coaching job yet, but eventually it'll probably happen. His relevant coaching history includes 2 years as the coordinator of the Buffaloes in Colorado. They were one of the worst teams and one of the worst offenses in college. They were 109th in 2011 and 120th in 2012, so basically one of the worst offenses in college football. But the good news is he's been a lot better since he found a home with Andy Reid in Kansas City when they hired Mahomes. Every year, the Chiefs have at least a top 8 offense. They've had a top 1 and a top 5 offense the first 2 years Bieniemy was there. They've been first in yards twice. They've been third. They've been sixth. So their offense has been absolutely deadly. They've won a Super Bowl. They've played in another Super Bowl. They've had many great playoff showings. The concerns with Bieniemy are pretty obvious, being that beyond the legal problems that I just laid out, is he just a dude who holds Andy Reid's clipboard? Who knows? So I'm not crazy about Bieniemy. I'm a little higher on Brian Daboll, the offensive coordinator of the Buffalo Bills. He's been around for a while, and he's been around some really bad offenses, but he's also now done some really good stuff in Buffalo. So he started out in 2009 in Cleveland as the offensive coordinator for a terrible offense in 2009 and 2010, 29th and 31st respectively, 32nd and 29th in yards respectively. Then he took over in Miami and had a little more success. He was only there for 1 year, but they scored a little under 21 points a game, 20th in the league, 22nd in yards. Okay. Took over in Kansas City for a year, and they were the stone worst. They averaged about 13 points a game, worst in the league. And that kind of got him off the offensive coordinator bus for a little bit. Let's just leave it at that. He ended up coaching a year as a coordinator at Alabama, the Crimson Tide, in 2017. They averaged over 37 points a game, which was 15th in the nation. Really good offense. And then he got his job in Buffalo, and you can see how quickly he's progressed. In 2018, they were awful. 30th, less than 17 points a game, less than 300 yards a game. 2019, they took a step. They got closed in on 20 points a game, 23rd, 330 yards a game, 24th. And the last 2 years, they have been incredible. Last year, they were second in the league in points and yards. So far this year, they're first in the league in points and sixth in yards. It's great results across the board. And you can see the way he's developed personally, Josh Allen, the way he's developed some of the running backs they got over there, the way that he's developed that offensive line into maybe the best unit in football outside of Cleveland. There's a lot to like about Brian Daboll, and if we went after him as the next head coach, that would make a lot of sense, and I would not be opposed to that. Another interesting candidate here is Nathaniel Hackett. He's currently with the Packers, and I'm kind of getting the Bieniemy vibes here, but let's go through the resume anyway. He's only 42, so he's still very young. He was the offensive coordinator for the Syracuse Orange for 2 years. The first year they were pretty bad, 24 points, 84th in the league. 2012, they were a lot better, 30 points a game, closer to the middle of the nation, and 476 yards a game. So actually pretty decent. Then he went to Buffalo, the Bills, and he did okay. 2013, they were 22nd in points. The next year, they scored a little bit more, and they were up to 18th in points, despite having way fewer yards. After that, he was out of the offensive coordinator business for a little bit, ended up in Jacksonville, and he was there for that 1 year where the Jaguars had a really good offense in 2017 when they actually made a deep playoff run. 26 points a game, 5th, and 365 yards, 6th. And then, of course, 2018, everything went to hell. They were 31st in points, 27th in yards, and he got fired midway through the season. And that brings us to where he is right now. He teamed up with Matt LaFleur in Green Bay, and you could call him another likely candidate to be that clipboard holder that I was talking about. There are these coaches who actually are involved in what their team does and actually have a say and an impact on the team's success or failure. And then there are just the dudes who hold the clipboard. This guy kind of smells like a clipboard holder to me, but he will be a candidate this offseason. 2019, first year under LaFleur and Hackett, they were an average offense in Green Bay, 15th in points. The next year, they blew up, 32 points a game, first in the league, top 5 in yards. So far this year, they've been middle of the pack again, 24 points a game. A lot of this is because of what they did in the first game of the year, honestly, but they're not having their best year. So Nathaniel Hackett losing a little bit of his luster. I think that would be fair to say, but he'll be on the list. Not crazy about what I'm seeing here, though. Next is Mike McDaniel, and his resume is actually extremely short because he's only been an offensive coordinator for 8 games. So I don't know if that resume is going to be good enough to warrant a head coaching gig, but he does come from a very illustrious tree with the Shanahan tree. He's the offensive coordinator for Shanahan in San Francisco. He's only 39, so he's young. So far this year, the Niners, despite having garbage quarterbacks, are averaging 24 points a game, which is 16th in the league, and they're above average in yards. So it's not a bad offense at all. It's actually bordering on a decent offense. So I don't know if the Mike McDaniel thing would make any more sense than like Shane Waldron. Like if you're going to go get McDaniel, you could easily argue why not just keep Waldron as head coach, but he's going to be on the list. Byron Leftwich is the next guy we're going to take a peek at here. Young, 42 years old, and he might be a clipboard holder, but I kind of like this. He's been the offensive coordinator in Tampa Bay ever since Arians got there. The first year, they were top 3 in points and yards. Last year, they were 3rd in points and 7th in yards. And so far this year, they are 2nd in points and 2nd in yards. So you can call him Bruce Arians' clipboard holder if you want to, and you might be right. But he's been around nothing but good offenses so far in his young coaching career. And sometimes you do have to take a risk with this stuff. Nobody on this list is guaranteed to be a great head coach. So you might just have to hope that some of these guys, in the process of holding people's clipboards, learn something. So Byron Leftwich would be a very interesting home run swing, I think. But based off what he's been around and based off some of the results in Tampa, remember, there was definitely some flaws. There were definitely flaws with the Arians-Brady marriage. And Leftwich did kind of help meld it together because Brady did not play the way Arians wanted his quarterback to play when he was in New England. So you got to give Leftwich some credit for helping make that work. Okay, Joe Brady is next on the list. He hasn't done too well in Carolina so far, so some of the shine is off of that apple. But he would only be 33 years old, very young. He's basically my age. So that luster that is still on his name from what he did in college still counts for something. So if you want to give him a shot, in 2020, he led the Panthers to scoring about 22 points a game, which was 24th. They were 21st in yards so far this year, 22nd in points, and 25th in yards. It's not really the kind of resume that typically gets a head coaching job, but he's going to be on the list regardless because of his college success. And now we're going to go over to some of the defensive guys. And I would personally prefer a offensive-minded head coach. I think that'll make the next steps easier. But you could go get a defensive-first guy and just kind of flip the script a little bit. So let's go through a couple guys who are defense-first who are going to be on the list. So the first guy, this is probably the guy who is most likely to get a head coaching job somewhere. Todd Bowles in Tampa Bay. They won the Super Bowl last year, and he's doing some really nice things with that Tampa Bay defense. He's already 58, so that's not ideal, but you can certainly work with it. His history as a defensive coordinator or head coach includes 2 years in Arizona, where he was actually really good. 7th in points in 2013 and 6th in yards. In 2014, they were 5th in points allowed, but 22nd in yards allowed, so that's a little bit odd, but both years they were a top 20 percentile defense in terms of points allowed. Really good results that got him a head coaching job. That first year in New York, things went really well. Went 10-6. They were 11th in points and 9th in points allowed. So they were scoring. They were preventing scores. They barely missed the playoffs. And then everything that was so good just went so bad. 2016, 5-11. 2017, 5-11. 2018, 4-12. You're out of here. 30th in points, 24th in points, 23rd in points, 28th in points allowed, 22nd in points allowed, 29th in points allowed. Bad. Like, we'll call it bad. Not that the Jets have had any more success since he left, for whatever that's worth. But it's not a good resume. He did go to Tampa Bay and found a lot of success there, however. In 2019, this was the Jameis Winston year. 28 more than 28 points a game allowed, which was one of the worst in the league. However, they were middle of the road in yards. These point totals were largely because Jameis Winston was a turnover machine, so the defense was actually pretty decent. In 2020, with a better quarterback at the helm, they only allowed 22 points a game, which was 8th, so top 10 defense, 6th in yards. And so far this year, they're 14th in points allowed and 8th in yards. So he's done some good stuff over there. and he's revived his reputation a little bit. So Todd Bowles going to be on a lot of lists. Okay, another defensive guy would be Matt Eberflus from Indianapolis. He's 52, reasonably aged, been there since 2018. In 2018, the Colts were a top 10 defense in points allowed and 11th in yards allowed. 2019, they were 18th. They had a little bit of a down year this year, and they were 16th in yards, so still average. In 2020, they were top 10 again, top 10 in allowing points, top 8 in allowing yards. And so far this year, they are only 14th in points and 12th in yards. So they've been anywhere from average to good every year he's been there. He's largely responsible from a coaching perspective for making Darius Leonard the great linebacker that he is today. And he's somebody who is going to get some head coaching buzz. Will probably end up with a few interviews this offseason. The next guy is Joe Woods, currently the defensive coordinator in Cleveland. And I don't know if his star is bright right now, but he's done some very good things in his young defensive coordinating career. His first year in Denver, 2017, they allowed a lot of points, but they only allowed 290 yards a game. They allowed a lot of points because they had Trevor Siemian playing quarterback in large part. And when you don't have a quarterback, you're going to have turnovers, you're going to have a lot of punch, you're going to have bad field position, stuff's going to happen. Now in 2018, it really flipped. He started giving up yards, still giving up a decent chunk of points, and he was out of Denver after that season. But this first year is actually kind of remarkable when you compare it to other teams in the league. Then you have his work as a coordinator in Cleveland. He's done all right. 2020, they were 26 points allowed per game, which was 21st, so below average, but not terrible. In terms of yards, they were middle of the road. So far this year, they are improved, and Myles Garrett may very well win Defensive Player of the Year, allowing 22.5 points a game, 13th. But look at this, 3rd in yards allowed, barely allowing more than 300 yards a game. Really impressive from Joe Woods. I like it. And I don't know if that's good enough to warrant a head coaching gig, but Joe Woods should probably at least be part of the interview process for some team as a head coach. And I believe that's all we have. So mostly offensive guys. Again, my favorite is Kellen Moore. There are some guys on this list that I'm not crazy about. I wouldn't be too enthusiastic about Todd Bowles. I wouldn't be too enthusiastic about Bieniemy or Hackett. But they're all going to be reasonable candidates, and you can talk yourself into any of them being good. So once you have your head coach, whoever it may be, and you can pick your favorite, I've already picked mine, you move on from there, you build your staff. And most of the staff building is going to take care of itself. So first, if you hire an offense-first head coach, like a Kellen Moore or a Joe Brady or Eric Bieniemy, then what you would prefer to be able to do is sublet control of the defense to a guru, kind of like what I was saying you would do if you hired Lincoln Riley. So a lot of the stuff I said in the White Pill video still applies here. If you hire an offensive-first head coach, then getting a defensive guru, my guys are Brian Flores, Patrick Graham, Dom Capers, Wade Phillips. You kind of allow the head coach to delegate a little bit more. You allow him to control what he's good at and allow somebody else to control what he might not be so good at. If you hire a defensive first head coach, then you can hire an offensive guru, offensive coordinator. Like you could keep Shane Waldron in that scenario. You could go get Kevin O'Connell from Los Angeles. You could get Tim Kelly from the Houston Texans. So your head coach kind of defines what your staff does from there, because most of the staff is going to be filled out with guys that the head coach hire likes or that he's familiar with or has experience with. So you just have to get the coordinator opposite the head coach's specialty. And these are some guys that I like. Okay, so yeah, that's pretty much all there is to say about the staff. If you bring in Kellen Moore, he's going to bring a couple people from Dallas probably, and he's going to bring some people that he knows from Boise State in. He's going to get a lot of guys that he's comfortable with and familiar with and thinks he can work with. And that's pretty much it for putting the staff together. So let's go to part 3, and this is going to be difficult, but we need to talk through it. Finding a trade partner for Russell Wilson. So you need to find a team that has enough assets to make you happy and enough talent in place for Wilson to be happy. So you can't just say any team. Remember, Wilson has a no trade clause. He can poo-poo any trade he wants to. So you're going to have to find the right team. And I think there are a lot of decent candidates out there. There is no slam dunk candidate like Tampa Bay was for Brady a couple years ago. But you can definitely find a team that should be willing to give up a lot of assets for Wilson in an attempt to go win a Super Bowl quickly. So before we get into the specific teams, I also want to add that if the team has a young quarterback with some amount of potential and they can be put in the trade, that's a plus because you're going to have a little bit of time for that guy to audition. So here are some teams. You've got the Miami Dolphins. They have a first round pick in 2022 and they have 2 first round picks in 2023. Plus they have Tua. And I'm not really in on Tua anymore, and I don't think the Dolphins are either. But you could do a trade revolving around these 3 first-round picks plus Tua. Their 2021 first round pick projects to be 13th overall. So you could probably say, hey, send us 3 first-round picks and Tua, and you can have Wilson. And maybe we throw a little bit in extra as well, but Tua doesn't have a hell of a lot of value right now. And none of these picks project to be like top 5. So you probably could get a pretty big haul there. And I think that if Wilson thinks the Dolphins can be good quickly, he might be okay with that. That part is a little dicey, but that's a problem for Wilson to worry about. As a team, it makes sense. We also have the Pittsburgh Steelers. They have their first round picks for the next 3 years, plus they have their second round pick still next year. So they could probably send 3 first round picks plus a second round pick because they don't really have anything else. And their picks in 2012 project to be somewhat late, 21st overall and 53rd overall, respectively. So not a huge chunk of value there, but you could squeeze out that extra second round pick, I think. And if they're ready to move on from Roethlisberger, they don't really have anybody waiting, so it would make sense for them to at least think about it. Okay, next up we have the Cleveland Browns, and I think this one's somewhat unlikely, but I want to mention it. I don't think Wilson wants to go to Cleveland. I don't think that's what he's interested in doing, but they could do 3 first-round picks plus Baker Mayfield. Their 2022 pick projects to be 17th overall right now, so that's not a primo pick, but you could probably get all 3 picks plus Mayfield, and you could give Mayfield a year to audition, maybe. I know he's going to be up for a contract extension soon. Maybe it wouldn't work, but you could certainly give it a shot. The next team would be the Denver Broncos. They've got their 3 first-round picks for the next 2 years. Next 3 years, excuse me. And they have a extra second-rounder from the Rams trade for Von Miller. So you could maybe get their 3 first-round picks for the next 3 years, plus that Rams second-rounder. And QB Drew Lock, who right now has very little value. Right now, Drew Lock, I don't know if he's worth more than like a 5th or 6th round pick, but you could take a flyer on him, let him audition for a year, see what's up, and then probably move on to the next guy after a year. The 2022 first round pick projects to be 16th overall, so it's a middling pick. And the second in 2022 from the Rams projects to be 62nd overall, so they're not great picks, but the value overall is still pretty nice. Then you've got the Philadelphia Eagles, and they are the dream team. They are the dream team you could try to drum up a deal with. They are a team that has proven they are willing to do bold things in order to compete quickly. And they have 3 really good first-round picks in 2022. They have 3 first-round picks. All of them project to be in the top 10. So you might have to send something extra back. I don't know how much. It depends on how much the Eagles value Wilson. But you could get their 3 first-round picks plus Jalen Hurts, who they don't seem to really care for anymore. And you would probably send Wilson plus some extra stuff back, but you could get 3 top 10 picks in 2022 in exchange for Wilson. I don't know if the Eagles would part with that much value. That is an insane amount of value, but franchise QBs are hard to find. Maybe they would be willing to go for it rather than trying to hope and pray they can find the next one. Couple more teams here. The Washington football team, they have their next 3 first-round picks, Plus, they could send you Taylor Heineke, a young guy with some degree of potential and talent. Their first round pick next year projects to be 6th overall, so it's a very nice pick. Then you also have the New York Giants. They have 2 first round picks next year, so they're really well equipped to do this. They have their pick and the Bears pick. They have their first in 2023, and they have Daniel Jones they could send you as part of the package. You might have to give up a little bit extra, but that's fine. The firsts next year project to be 5th and 11th overall. So really good first rounders, really valuable. Again, maybe more valuable than Wilson by himself, but you could probably make something work here. The Saints, I think, are also on the table. I know they've coveted Wilson for a while, and they're always... I think it's been reported that they're constantly just hanging onto the edge of their phone, waiting for the Seahawks to decide they're willing to trade Wilson. They have their next 3 first-round picks and a second-round pick next year. The first-round pick next year projects to be 23rd overall, and their second projects to be 55th overall. So there's something there. You would probably get all 3 first-round picks plus the second-rounder if Wilson still has the value that I think he does. But there's something there. Here are a few more teams that I don't think can happen for one reason or another, but I should mention them. The Texans, I don't think Wilson would go for it. The Bears, they don't have their first-round pick this year or next year. And they only have had 1 year of Justin Fields. They might want to give him a little bit more time. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers are also on the list if Brady retires, but he probably won't. And they don't have great assets. And the Atlanta Falcons financially married themselves to Matty Ice after restructuring him, which was very, very stupid. But they did it, and they can't undo it. So those are the teams that I see as being contenders to trade for Wilson. You may need to throw extra sweeteners into deals with the Eagles and Giants, but that's okay. They are still the best possible trade partners. My dream scenario would be something like this. Wilson plus Alton Robinson plus a 3rd or maybe 2nd round pick in 2022 for their 3 first round picks plus Jalen Hurts, or Russell Wilson plus Alton Robinson plus the 3rd for the Giants' 2 first rounders plus their first rounder in 2023, plus Daniel Jones, because I actually think Daniel Jones might... I'm not going to go crazy with it, but I kind of like Daniel Jones. I like him a lot more than Jalen Hurts. I'll go that far. I'm just going to leave it at that. And those are my 2 favorite potential trades. The runner-up, the 3rd best deal, I think, would be with the football team. You could get 3 first-round picks, including a probable top 10 one this year, and Taylor Heineke, who has potential. Those would be the trades that I would be pursuing the hardest, that I would be going after with everything that I got. And if Wilson's value is not where that I think that it is, then I might reconsider my digesting of the red pill, honestly, because that's a lot of dead money we got to eat, and somebody's got to compensate us for that. So, with the Wilson trade out of the way, we can move on to the next step. Removing roster fat. There are some guys on this team who just plain need to go, and then there are some guys on this team who may need to go. Pretty simple. Bobby Wagner's making $20.4 million next year. I can't have that. We are closing in on 2 full calendar years since Bobby Wagner last forced a turnover. As a defensive player, aren't you supposed to help take the ball away at some point? Like, I'm not paying $20 million plus for a guy who never takes the ball away as a linebacker who plays every play almost. You only take on a less than $4 million debt if you cut him. You could bring him back at a much reduced salary, but honestly, I don't feel the need to squeeze all the blood out of something. I'm okay with letting something go with a little bit of blood left in it. Let him go to another team and ring chase or something. It's fine. Chris Carson, the neck injury, I cannot imagine him being part of any long-term plans right now. You save about $3.5 million if you cut him. And then you have Jason Myers. Even if he was having a good year, I might want to cut him, but he's not having a good year. You save $4 million if you cut him. So those to me are the 3 obvious ones. You got to do it. Before those cuts, you have $54 million in cap space. After the cuts, plus the Wilson trade, you have $89 million in cap space. You are flush with cap. And then you make decisions on the following players. These are the guys who I think could go either way depending on what the regime wants. Poona Ford, you save $5 million if you cut him. Gabe Jackson, you save $3 million if you cut him. Dunlap, you only save $1 million if you cut him. Not even, actually, but he he's not producing, so you might just have to take that one on the chin. Benson Mayowa, you save $1.5 million, but it's not that expensive either way, and he's Jag. He's just another dude. I don't think he's part of any long-term plans for this team, honestly. Kerry Hyder, save $2 million if you cut him. LJ Collier, save about $1 million if you cut him. Belor, you save $2.1 million if you cut him. Marquise Blair, you save about $1.4 million if you cut him. These are the guys you have to make a decision on. They are like Poona Ford. I think Poona Ford's good, and he obviously has a place in the NFL, but there are some defensive coordinators out there who don't like big fat guys who are just waddling around. They like athletes. They want all their defensive linemen to be athletes. And if you have one of those, if you hire him, he might say, I can't use Poona. So it just depends. But they can go either way. Next up, once you clear all the roster fat, you could get up to over $100 million in cap space. You're probably going to want to spend some of that cap space on DK Metcalf because you're going to have to extend him. Hopefully he's down with it. Based off recent top-end receiver contracts and Metcalf's recent production, I would expect something like 4 years, $100 million, or 3 years, $75 million, depending on what he wants. But that's what you're going to be looking at, and you can easily structure the contract to front-load it or back-load it, whatever you feel like you need to do in order to make the best team possible. Maybe you front-load it massively the first year, and then the next couple years, it's not so bad. And then here are some guys who I think you could bring back, or you could choose not to, depending on the priorities of the organization. Quandre Diggs, I think you would be like 3 for $33 million. You could bring him back, or you could do something else there. Either way, Gerald Everett's not having a good season, so he might just come back at 1 year $5 million, or maybe the same 1 year $6 million he got last year. Al Woods, you could get him back for about the same deal you got him for. Alex Collins is having a good year, so maybe you get 1 year $3 million. Ryan Neal, $2.5 million. Brian Monet, $2.5 million. They're both good young players who have a role and could be part of a good Seahawks team down the line because of their youth and because of their decent potential. So you're going to make decisions there, and it just depends on the priorities of the organization at the time. Okay, so at that point, you hit free agency. And the first free agency period under this new regime has a lot of flexibility, and that's what I really like about the red pill. Now, obviously, the roster building will be dependent on who you bring in. If you bring in an offensive guy, he's going to want to do things a certain way. A defensive guy is going to want to do things another way. There are different schemes out there. There are different philosophies out there. It depends. However, there are some universal truths here. Like building the offensive line would be a good idea because whoever your quarterback is going to be in 2023, if it's Daniel Jones, if it's Spencer Rattler, if it's some dude that we're not even really aware of right now, if it's some rookie from the 2023 class, they're going to need to get protected. And if you can put that offensive line in place before you get the quarterback, I think that's actually ideal. So if you build the offensive line in free agency, Teron Armstead is still a great option. He can lock down that position for 3 years minimum. And Austin Corbett is still a great option at center. So you can do the same things you did in the white pill in the red pill. It still would make sense. It's still a good idea to build your offensive line up with blue chippers and guys who you know can be good. Some other things that would intrigue me is you could make a big investment in a tight end like a Dallas Goedert from Philly. He's going to be a free agent. If you don't trade Wilson to Philly, they might just look to blow it up a little bit themselves, and Dallas Goedert would probably be a casualty of that. He's as far as I can tell, by far the best available tight end option in free agency. So you could just build a supercharged offense around Goddard, Metcalf, Lockett, hopefully Eskridge, and just get the next quarterback all the weapons he's ever going to need. I would also take a look at some edge rushers who will be not super high priced in free agency because they're damaged goods, they have baggage. There's just something going on there that is going to prevent them from getting the big bucks. Dante Fowler Jr., Anthony Barr, Emmanuel Ogba, Hassan Reddick, Takaris McKinley, Derek Barnett, Randy Gregory. Look at those guys, figure out who you like, figure out who fits what you're trying to do, and go offer them some money and see who you end up being able to go get. None of those guys are going to be like $100 million players. You can give them prove-it deals to see if they can be part of the future. So if they end up being good, then you can keep them for 2023. But because they're not going to demand huge money, you can probably give them deals that are easy to get out of after a year if they're not cutting it. Or the money they're making is so cheap it doesn't really matter if you keep them or not. So those are the things that I would do in the first free agency period. However, this is a full rebuild. So these are options. The team can choose to not do any of these things. They can choose to do some of them. They can choose to do other sums of them. They can choose to do none of them. They can choose to do, I don't think you would do all of them, but you have options. This is the benefit of not attempting a rapid fire build for Wilson. Because if you keep Wilson, he's going to want to win very quickly, if not immediately. But now you don't have to worry about that so much. That's why I'm a red pillar at the end of the day. Like, you could decide to build your offensive line through the draft instead. If you keep Wilson, that's going to be really hard because he's not going to want to work behind a bunch of rookies because he's going to get killed. But if you trade for Drew Lock or Daniel Jones or Jalen Hurts, let them get killed. Who cares? They can die. Not really, but you know what I'm talking about. You see what I'm saying here, right? You get that flexibility. Like, if we keep Wilson next year, I honestly think the only left tackle that we could get that could make it work is Armstead. He's the only guy. Maybe you could talk me into like a George Fant or something because he's playing well and the Jets might cut him. But you need somebody who's going to be great, and he's going to be great like that. You can't mess around. Here you can mess around because you have time. So that being said, now you have options in the draft because you have better picks because you traded Wilson. So let's say the Wilson trade nets you one top 5 selection. So one potential path would be to build the defense. So maybe you could get Thibodeau from Oregon, Hutchinson from Michigan, or Karlaftis from Purdue. All 3 of those guys are likely to be top 10 picks. I think Thibodeau's likely to be a top 1 pick, actually, so he might not be there. But the point is, somebody is going to be there who is really, really good, ideal for any defense, and you can really build your defense around that guy. Imagine if you got a guy like Aiden Hutchinson and put him across from Darrell Taylor. You would be set for a little while there. And if in the Wilson trade you can get another top 10 pick, like let's say you make that trade with the Giants or the Eagles, then you could also go get Derek Stingley Jr. from LSU, the top cornerback by far. And imagine if you're going into your next phase of your defense with 2 blue chipper doesn't even begin to cut it with these guys. Aiden Hutchinson and Derek Stingley Jr., they're blue chipper, they're gold chippers. Forget blue chipper. Imagine if you could go into the next era with that. And again, you don't have to. The team is free to utilize the draft to build the offensive line now. They could build the defense through free agency and then build the offensive line in the draft. You could use your top 5 or top 10 pick on Evan Neal from Alabama. He's clearly the top offensive tackle prospect this year. Then you have Tyler Linderbaum, who is rocketing up draft boards lately. He's starting to get top 10 buzz, one of the best center prospects in years, according to my sources right now. So you can mix or match these players depending on what you did in free agency. You could get Hutchinson and Linderbaum. You could get Evan Neal and George Karlaftis if you get those 2 top 10 picks with the Giants or the Eagles. This is the flexibility that I'm talking about here. And by the way, I wouldn't do this, but you could trade DK Metcalf for 2 first-rounders or some equivalent and give yourself some options in the middle to late part of the first round. You can really kickstart this rebuild, and I would keep Metcalf because he's still really young and he's really, really good, and you need to build around something. But what if you did trade him because you just didn't think it was going to work? You would unlock the ability to go after a guy like Kenyon Green from Texas A&M, super versatile offensive tackle, Trevor Penning from Northern Iowa, and my favorite, Daniel Falele from Minnesota. Great offensive tackle options. You could get a Metcalf replacement who's going to be a lot cheaper, Garrett Wilson, Drake London. They're the 2 top receiver prospects. You could even get a QB of the future this draft. I wouldn't do it. It's not my preference, but you could get Kenny Pickett from Pittsburgh or Desmond Ridder from Cincinnati. I kind of like both those guys. So the point is here, you can do almost anything once you get rid of those cornerstones. Those cornerstones like Wilson and Metcalf, like they're obviously two of your best. They're probably your two best players. They probably are. But having them kind of forces you to do things a certain way. And sometimes, most of the time, that's great. But in this situation where we're trying to maybe blow things up a little bit and start over, maybe it makes more sense to just move on from everything, and that way you can take your time a little bit here. Okay, at that point, you just prepare for the future. 2023. Look, 2022, you give Drew Lock a chance. You give Daniel Jones a chance. You give whoever you got. Maybe it's Jacob Eason. Who cares? And maybe you have a decent season. Maybe you don't. But you're building for 2023. It's a 2-year plan. And I think you can pull it off. The free agency pool in 2023, as of right now, there are guys that you can get to push yourself over the top. Tyreek Hill's going to be 29. Fletcher Cox is 32. Grady Jarrett's 29. Zadarius Smith, James Bradbury, Jack Conklin, Javon Hargrave, Yannick Ngakoue, Dalvin Tomlinson, Adrian Amos, Devin White. All these guys are going to be valuable free agents in 2023. You could decide, let's go splurge with those guys. Now, some of them are going to get re-signed, but some of them won't. You can choose to spend your cap space right then. You can wait for the right player. You don't just have to go for the best player that you can get. You can wait for a genuinely great fit for you. You can wait for the perfect opportunity because you've got that extra window of time that you wouldn't necessarily have with Wilson. The 2023 draft, which you could have multiple first-round picks in as well if you trade Wilson, and you'll have as many as 3 if you trade Metcalf, could include quarterbacks like C.J. Stroud, DJ Uiagalelei, and Grant Gunnell. Ohio State quarterback, but C.J. Stroud's going to be a hot prospect. DJ replaced Trevor Lawrence at Clemson, I think, and Grant Gunnell, Memphis. There are going to be some top-end blue-chip pass rushers, Will Anderson, Miles Murphy, and Donnell Harris. And we've also got some really good offensive tackle prospects. Early names to watch would be Turner Corcoran and Paris Johnson Jr. So you've got some early targets. And there are going to be a lot of names that are going to make themselves known over the next year and a half as well. So you have full flexibility to approach these off seasons in dozens of different ways. There are a lot of different paths to produce a 2023 team that is ready to go to war with a new quarterback, great offensive line, good weapons, and a great defense. So you have to get these things right. Yes, of course. But you have more room to get a few things wrong. The reality is even the best front offices get things wrong sometimes. Or sometimes they get it right and then they get unlucky and it looks like they got it wrong. If you do this, you give yourself a little bit of extra time to get some things wrong. You don't pigeonhole yourself into having to do this one thing or one of 2 or 3 things. You don't go, I have to get Teron Armstead because I'm trying to protect Wilson. You can go, I could get Teron Armstead, or I could get Evan Neal. And I can wait a year for him to start playing effectively. I could get Austin Corbett, or I could get the Iowa dude. I could get this guy. I could get that guy. I could take a flyer on a late round guy, and if he misses, it's okay. I bought myself a little bit of extra time because I'm doing a full rebuild. That's where I am. That's how I feel. Let me know what you think down below. I'm out of here. Go Hawks. Videos later today, streams later today, but that to me is the beauty of the red pill. You can go so many different ways with it. It's versatile. And honestly, even though you're losing your quarterback, I think it just has a higher percentage chance of working. All right, see y'all later.